Can you be my husband?
I don't know what to say. I'm just a single dad.
I need an answer.
The first snow of December always softened the city, like a thin white blanket laid gently over its sharpest edges. Traffic still roared, buildings still loomed, and people still hurried with bowed heads and gloved hands, but something about the falling flakes made everything feel quieter, almost forgiving. For most people, snow meant warmth waiting on the other side of a door. It meant kitchens glowing with yellow light, the smell of cinnamon and sugar drifting through hallways, laughter echoing from living rooms. It meant belonging somewhere. For Daniel Hart, it meant the cold biting through his coat and the ache in his fingers as he tightened his grip around his daughter's small hand. "Daddy," Lily said, her voice thin but hopeful, "is it really Christmas Eve?" Her breath puffed into the air in tiny clouds as she spoke. She was 6 years old, with chestnut curls that refused to stay tucked into her knit hat and eyes too large for her narrow face. In her mittened hand, she clutched a glittery paper star she had made at school, a simple craft with uneven edges and glue still visible in the corners. "It is," Daniel said, forcing his mouth into a smile that felt heavier than it should have. "We're just running a little late." He hated lying to her. Hated it more than anything. They weren't running late, they were homeless. The truth sat like a stone in his chest, something he carried every moment of every day. But Lily didn't need to know that. Not yet, maybe not ever, if he could help it. 2 months earlier, Daniel had still been a man with a job, an apartment, and a plan. He had worked for a construction firm for nearly a decade, climbing slowly but steadily from site supervisor to project manager. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills, kept food on the table, and allowed him to tuck Lily into her own bed every night. Then October came. A major contract fell through. Budget cuts followed. Names were called into offices one by one. When Daniel's turn came, his manager wouldn't meet his eyes. "It's nothing personal," the man had said. "You're good at what you do. We just don't have the money." Daniel had walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box with his name scrawled on the side, telling himself this was temporary. He'd been through setbacks before. He would bounce back, he always did. He applied everywhere: construction companies, warehouses, shipping yards, hardware stores. He took night shifts when he could get them. He sold his car. He skipped meals so Lily wouldn't have to. But rent did not wait for hope or effort, and when he missed one payment, then another, the eviction notice came faster than he had ever imagined possible. The day the locks were changed, Lily had stood beside him in the hallway, holding her backpack. "Are we moving?" she had asked. "Just for a little while," Daniel had said. He had believed it. Now, on Christmas Eve, they walked through the city streets with everything they owned packed into 2 second-hand backpacks. Lily didn't complain. She never did. To her, this was simply another version of their life. A strange one, yes, but also something like an adventure. Daniel clung to that innocence even as it broke his heart. They stopped outside a department store window glowing with artificial warmth. Inside, a plastic family sat around a fake fireplace, their faces frozen in perfect smiles. A Christmas tree stood behind them, ornaments catching the light. On the small table between them were mugs of what was clearly meant to be hot chocolate, complete with little white marshmallows. Lily pressed her nose to the glass. "Daddy," she whispered. "They're having hot chocolate." The words weren't a complaint. They were simply an observation, soft and almost reverent. Daniel swallowed hard. He had used the last of his cash earlier that afternoon to buy her a small sandwich from a corner shop. He told himself it was enough. It had to be. He crouched beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Hey," he said gently. "How about we go see the big tree in the square? They've got music and lights." She turned toward him, eyes bright despite the cold. "The really big one?" "The biggest one in the whole city. That was enough." Lily grinned and took his hand again, tugging him forward. The square was alive with sound and color. Strings of lights crisscrossed above the open space, glowing gold against the gray sky. A brass band played carols near the fountain, their music carrying across the crowd. Volunteers in red scarves handed out mittens, hats, and cups of something steaming. Couples stood arm in arm. Children laughed. Phones flashed as people took photos beneath the towering Christmas tree, which glittered with thousands of tiny bulbs. For a moment, just a moment, Daniel let himself pretend. He imagined that they were just another family out enjoying the evening. That in an hour they would go home to a warm apartment, hang up their coats, and drink cocoa in mismatched mugs. He imagined Lily falling asleep on the couch while a movie played in the background. The ache that followed the fantasy was almost unbearable. They found a spot near the fountain, where Lily began to spin in slow circles, her boots crunching lightly against the thin layer of snow. She held her paper star up as if it were something magical. "Daddy, look," she said, laughing. "It's like I'm part of the lights." Daniel smiled. "You are the brightest thing here." She giggled, then suddenly stopped and tilted her head, studying the people around them. His heart tensed automatically. Lily had always been observant, too observant for a child her age. She noticed things he wished she wouldn't. She pointed. "That lady," Lily said. "She looks lonely." Daniel followed her gaze. A woman stood near the edge of the square, slightly apart from the clusters of families and couples. She was tall, wearing a long black coat that reached almost to her ankles. Her dark hair was swept back neatly, though a few strands had escaped and clung to her face in the cold. One hand held a phone to her ear. Her posture was straight, composed, but there was something in the stillness of her that made her seem separate, as if she were present physically, but somewhere else entirely. Daniel hesitated. "Lily?" But Lily had already let go of his hand. She crossed the short distance between them, boots tapping softly against the pavement. Daniel's chest tightened as he followed. He hated bothering strangers. Hated the way people sometimes looked at them once they realized they were struggling. The woman noticed Lily approaching and quickly ended her call. She knelt down to the child's level, the movement smooth and unhurried. "Hi there," she said gently. "What have you got?" Lily held out the paper star with both hands. "I made it at school," she said, "for Christmas." "You can have it." The woman blinked, clearly taken aback. For a second she simply stared at the star as if unsure it was meant for her. "For me?" she asked. Lily nodded. "Because you look like you could use a star." Something shifted in the woman's expression, something soft, something almost fragile. She accepted the star carefully as if it might crumble in her hands. "Thank you," she said. "It's beautiful." Daniel cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how they must look, his worn coat, Lily's slightly too small boots, the thinness in their faces. "I'm sorry to interrupt," he said. "She just likes giving things away." The woman stood, still holding the star. "I like it," she said. Her eyes lifted to meet his, and Daniel was struck by their color gray, sharp with intelligence, but touched with something that looked very much like sadness. "I'm Charlotte." "Daniel," he replied. "This is Lily." "I know," Charlotte said, glancing down at Lily with a faint smile. "She's hard to miss," Lily beamed. For a moment, the three of them simply stood there, the band's music drifting through the cold air around them. "Would you like some cocoa?" Charlotte asked suddenly. "They're handing it out by the tree." Daniel opened his mouth to refuse on instinct. Pride rose automatically in his chest, that stubborn voice telling him he shouldn't accept things he hadn't earned. Then he looked at Lily. Her eyes were fixed on Charlotte, wide with hope. "That would be kind of you," he said quietly. They joined the short line near the tree. Steam curled up from the cups volunteers were handing out. Lily bounced on her heels, talking excitedly about her school play, her favorite reindeer, the way snow sounded when it fell at night. Charlotte listened to every word as if it mattered. Daniel watched them, something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. Gratitude, yes, but also a strange sense of recognition, as though this moment was important in a way he couldn't yet understand. "So," Charlotte said when Lily ran ahead to watch the lights blink on and off in patterns, "you two out celebrating?" Daniel hesitated. He had learned how quickly sympathy could turn into pity, how quickly people became uncomfortable once they knew the truth. He had learned how often "I'm sorry" really meant, "I don't want to deal with this." But there was something in Charlotte's eyes that felt different, not curious, not judgmental, just open. "We're between places right now," he said carefully. Her expression changed, not with shock or discomfort, but with understanding so immediate it startled him. "I see," she said softly. They stood in silence for a moment, sipping their cocoa. It was warm and sweet, and Daniel realized how long it had been since he'd tasted something that felt like comfort. Snow began to fall more heavily, catching in Lily's curls as she laughed beneath the lights. "I should get her back," Daniel said eventually. "Shelter curfew." Charlotte nodded. "Of course." They exchanged goodbyes. Lily hugged Charlotte around the waist, burying her face briefly in the woman's coat before pulling back. "Thank you for the cocoa," she said. "And for taking my star, I'll keep it," Charlotte promised. Daniel led Lily away, his heart oddly heavy. That night, the shelter was crowded. Families lined up for beds. Volunteers tried their best to make it feel festive. Paper decorations taped to the walls, a small artificial tree in the corner, but nothing could hide the exhaustion in the air. Lily fell asleep quickly on the narrow cot, clutching a second-hand teddy bear Daniel had found earlier in the week. Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The image of Charlotte standing beneath the lights, holding Lily's paper star, returned again and again. He didn't know why it stayed with him. She was a stranger. He had no reason to think of her when his life was already full of things he couldn't fix. And yet, as the sounds of the shelter settled into quiet breathing and distant footsteps, one thought kept echoing in his mind. She saw us. Not the way most people did, not as a problem, not as something awkward to avoid. She had simply seen them. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the city in white. And for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt something he had almost forgotten how to recognize: hope. Christmas morning arrived quietly, as if the city itself were holding its breath. Snow lay in smooth, untouched sheets along the sidewalks, and the usual rush of traffic was replaced by a strange, reverent stillness. Even the sky seemed softer, a pale winter gray that filtered light like a veil. Daniel woke before Lily. The shelter was unusually calm. Most of the families were still asleep, children bundled under donated blankets, adults curled protectively around them. Somewhere down the hall, a volunteer hummed a carol under her breath as she refilled a coffee pot. Daniel sat on the edge of the narrow cot, rubbing his hands together for warmth. He watched Lily's chest rise and fall as she slept, her face peaceful in a way that almost hurt to look at. She had gone to bed smiling. The cocoa, the lights, the music last night had given her something real to hold on to. Something normal, something good, and Charlotte. The name surfaced in his thoughts before he could stop it. He had tried to tell himself she was just a kind stranger, that he was reading too much into a single moment of warmth. But even now, in the quiet of the shelter, he could still see the way she had held Lily's paper star. Like it meant something. Daniel gently shook Lily's shoulder. "Hey, sweetheart. Time to wake up." She blinked, then smiled when she saw him. "Is it really Christmas?" she whispered, as if afraid to break the spell. "It really is." They dressed quietly. Lily wore her coat over the same sweater she had worn for days, but she didn't seem to notice. Daniel tightened the laces on her boots and brushed a curl from her forehead. "Where are we going?" she asked as they stepped outside. "Just for a walk," he said. "It's nice out." The city felt different in the morning. The noise was muted, the usual crowds replaced by scattered figures carrying wrapped gifts or walking dogs through the snow. Store windows still glowed with holiday displays, though most of the doors were closed. They walked toward the square without speaking, the cold air sharp in Daniel's lungs. He told himself he was simply giving Lily something beautiful to look at on Christmas morning. He told himself he wasn't hoping. But when the lights of the square came into view, his heart lifted despite his efforts. The tree still stood tall at the center, its thousands of bulbs shimmering against the pale daylight. A few early visitors wandered nearby, taking photos, sipping coffee, lingering beneath the decorations as if reluctant to let the season slip away. And then Lily stopped walking. "Daddy," she said softly. "Look," Daniel followed her gaze. Charlotte stood near the tree, her black coat stark against the snow. She was speaking with a man in a tailored suit, her posture straight, composed. The man gestured animatedly as he talked. But Charlotte's attention seemed elsewhere, her eyes drifting occasionally across the square. For a moment, Daniel considered turning back. He didn't want to seem as though they were following her, didn't want to create the wrong impression. But Lily had already begun to run. "Star Lady," she called. Charlotte turned. Surprise flickered across her face before it softened into a smile that felt almost relieved. "Lily," she said. "Daniel," the man beside her frowned slightly, clearly confused. "You know them?" he asked. Charlotte hesitated just for a fraction of a second. Then she said, "Yes, they're friends." Something about the word made Daniel's skin prickle. The man checked his watch. "I should go." "The board meeting is in an hour." He nodded politely to Daniel and Lily. "Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas," Daniel replied automatically. The man walked away, his shoes leaving crisp impressions in the snow. Charlotte exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath. "I'm glad you came back," she said. Lily hugged her again, wrapping her small arms around Charlotte's waist. Charlotte laughed softly and hugged her back, careful not to crush her. Daniel watched the exchange with a strange mixture of warmth and unease. They began to walk slowly through the square. Lily darted ahead, chasing imaginary patterns in the snow. "She hasn't stopped talking about you," Daniel said. "About the star," Charlotte smiled. "I kept it," she said. "It's in my coat pocket." "Really?" She reached inside and pulled out the folded paper star. The glitter caught the light even in the daylight. Lily gasped. "You kept it!" "I told you I would," Charlotte said. Lily beamed, then ran ahead again, pretending the fountain was a castle guarded by invisible dragons. They walked in comfortable silence for a few moments. Daniel was acutely aware of Charlotte beside him, the quiet confidence in her movements, the faint scent of perfume beneath the cold air. "Daniel," Charlotte said finally, "can I ask you something personal?" His shoulders tensed instinctively. "Sure." She stopped walking. He stopped too. She looked at him with an intensity that made his heart begin to pound. "Would you consider being my husband?" For a second, the world seemed to tilt. The sounds of the square, the distant laughter, the faint hum of traffic blurred into something far away. Daniel stared at her, certain he had misheard. "I'm sorry," he said. "What?" "I know how it sounds," Charlotte said quickly. "And I don't mean romantically, not like that, I mean legally." "In name." He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're asking a man you met yesterday to marry you?" She swallowed. "Yes." Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. He felt as if he were standing in the middle of a dream, one that made no sense and yet felt strangely real. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you ask me something like that?" Charlotte glanced toward Lily, who was now crouched near the fountain, dropping pebbles into the water and watching the ripples. "Because I don't have much time," she said quietly. "And because I don't have anyone else I can trust?" She took a breath, steadying herself. "My father built a company," she began, "a technology firm. He started it in a garage when I was a child. It grew into something big, global. When he died, he left it to me." Daniel listened, still struggling to process the question that hung between them. "There was a clause in his will," Charlotte continued. "Outdated, stupid. It said that the CEO of the company must be married. He believed leadership required stability, a family image." Daniel frowned. "That can't be legal." "I thought the same," she said. "I challenged it in court. I argued it was discriminatory, and I almost won. But the board found a loophole. If the majority of shareholders agreed, the clause could be enforced." His stomach tightened. "And they did. They did." Her voice was steady, but something in her eyes flickered. "They gave me until the end of the year." Daniel glanced around the square. "That's in 6 days." "Yes," a cold weight settled in his chest. "If I'm not married by then," Charlotte said, "they'll remove me as CEO? They'll install someone they can control? Someone who will turn my father's company into something he never wanted it to be." Daniel shook his head slowly. "So you want a marriage of convenience?" "Yes." He stared at her, a dozen thoughts colliding in his mind. "This is insane," he said. "I know," she replied. "But it's real." He looked at Lily, at the way she was smiling to herself as she played in the snow. The thought of involving her in something this complicated, this fragile, made his chest ache. "Why me?" he asked again. Charlotte's gaze softened. "Because you didn't ask me for anything last night," she said. "You didn't try to impress me. You didn't even tell me your situation outright. You just took care of your daughter, quietly, steadily. She paused. I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me. Power, money, influence. You didn't. Daniel felt something twist inside him. You don't know me, he said. Not really. I know enough, she replied. And I don't need perfection. I need someone who won't betray me. He let out a slow breath. What happens after? He asked. After the deadline? We stay married long enough for me to rewrite the clause. To secure the company legally so this can never happen again. 6 months. A year at most. She met his eyes. Then we divorce quietly. No scandal, no mess. And in the meantime, I'll make sure you and Lily are taken care of, Charlotte said. A home, healthcare, education, stability. The words landed with a weight Daniel could barely comprehend. A home. A bed for Lily that was hers. A future that wasn't built day by day on fear, but the price was enormous. This would be a lie, he said. We'd be pretending. Not about everything, Charlotte said. Just about how it started. Daniel laughed weakly. You make it sound so simple. It isn't, she admitted. But it's necessary. He looked away, staring at the snow-dusted pavement. His pride flared, instinctively pride he had fought to hold on to through every rejection, every closed door, every night spent wondering how much longer he could protect Lily. I'm not a charity case, he said quietly. Charlotte's expression tightened. I'm not offering charity. It feels like it. I'm offering a partnership, she said. I need something from you, your name, your presence, your willingness to stand beside me. He studied her face, the determination there, the underlying fear she was trying not to show. You'd trust me with your entire company, he said. Yes, and you'd put your reputation, your future, in the hands of a man you met because your daughter gave me a paper star. She gave a small, sad smile. Life is strange like that. They stood in silence. The cold crept into Daniel's bones, but he barely noticed. He thought of the shelter, of Lily asking if they were moving again, of the way she had looked at the department store window the night before. He thought of what it meant to be a father, to make choices, not just for yourself, but for a small life that depended on you for everything. Daddy? Lily called from across the square. Can the castle come with us? Daniel turned toward her. She was pointing at the fountain, her face bright with imagination. He swallowed. I need time, he said to Charlotte. I can't answer something like this on the spot. She nodded immediately. Of course. I shouldn't have expected anything else. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a business card. Call me, she said. Anytime, day or night. Even if the answer is no, he took the card, his fingers brushing hers. The contact was brief, but it sent a strange jolt through him. They said goodbye, Lily hugging Charlotte once more before skipping back to Daniel's side. As they walked away, Daniel felt as though he were leaving behind something more than just a conversation. That night, back at the shelter, Lily fell asleep almost as soon as her head touched the pillow. Daniel did not. He lay staring at the ceiling, the hum of distant traffic seeping through the walls. Charlotte's words replayed in his mind over and over. I need someone I can trust. I'm offering a partnership. I'll make sure you and Lily are taken care of. Was it wrong to accept help that came wrapped in conditions? Was it dishonest to enter a marriage that wasn't born of love? Or was it more wrong to let pride stand in the way of Lily's safety? He thought of the look on Charlotte's face when she had said she would lose her father's company. He had recognized that look. It was the look of someone standing on the edge of something precious, trying desperately not to fall. By the time dawn crept through the shelter windows, Daniel had not slept. On December 27th, with trembling hands, he dialed the number on the card. Charlotte, he said when she answered. It's Daniel. Yes, she replied softly. I know. He closed his eyes. Let's talk. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and disinfectant, a strange combination that made Daniel feel as though he were stepping into something both permanent and painfully temporary. They arrived just after 9 in the morning. There were no photographers waiting outside, no friends gathered on the steps, no family members whispering in the background. Just Charlotte in a simple cream-colored dress that skimmed her knees, her dark hair pinned back neatly, and Daniel in a borrowed charcoal suit that didn't quite fit his shoulders. Lily walked between them, gripping her paper star like it was something holy. Daniel kept waiting for the moment when reality would catch up with him, when someone would stop them and say there had been a mistake, that this couldn't possibly be happening, but no one did. Inside, the clerk sat behind a thick counter, glasses perched low on her nose. She asked for their identification, stamped several documents, and motioned them toward a small room at the end of the hall. "This will only take a few minutes," she said kindly. "A few minutes." That was all it took, apparently, to rewrite a life. They stood before a small wooden desk. There was no aisle, no music, no guests. Just the three of them and the quiet hum of fluorescent lights. Daniel glanced at Charlotte. She looked calm, composed, almost too composed. But when he studied her closely, he saw the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the desk. She was afraid. So was he. The clerk cleared her throat and began reading the vows in a steady, practiced voice. "Do you, Charlotte Avery, take Daniel Hart to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "Yes," Charlotte said without hesitation. Daniel felt his heart hammer against his ribs. "Do you, Daniel Hart, take Charlotte Avery?" For a fraction of a second, everything inside him rebelled. This was wrong, his mind whispered. This was not how marriage was supposed to begin. There were supposed to be promises made from love, from devotion, not from desperation. But then he saw Lily in his peripheral vision, standing straight and serious, her small hands folded around the glittery star. He thought of the shelter, of cold nights and borrowed beds, of the fear he carried every time Lily asked where they would sleep next. He looked back at Charlotte, at the woman who had offered him not charity, but trust. "I do," he said. The words echoed strangely in the room. The clerk smiled, stamped the final document, and slid it across the desk. "Congratulations," she said. Just like that, they were married. Outside, the winter sun had begun to break through the clouds. The city looked exactly the same as it had when they arrived. People passed by, carrying shopping bags, sipping coffee, talking on their phones, completely unaware that something enormous had just happened inside that building. Charlotte let out a breath she seemed to have been holding since they entered. Daniel felt lightheaded. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, unsure of what came next. Lily broke the silence. "So, is she my mom now?" she asked. Daniel's chest tightened. Charlotte knelt down in front of her, eyes gentle. "I won't ever replace your mom," she said softly, "but I can be someone who cares about you." "Very much." Lily studied her face with the seriousness only children could manage, then nodded. "Okay," she said simply. Charlotte stood and reached into her purse. "These are for you," she said, handing Daniel a small set of keys. "Our place." Daniel stared at them. "Already?" he asked. Charlotte gave a faint smile. "I don't do things halfway." The apartment was nothing like anything Daniel had ever lived in. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating warm hardwood floors and clean white walls. The living room opened onto a small balcony overlooking the city. The kitchen gleamed with stainless steel and marble countertops. Everything smelled faintly of citrus and something floral, clean, expensive, untouched. Lily stood just inside the doorway, eyes wide. "This is ours?" she whispered. "Yes," Charlotte said. Lily let out a squeal and dropped her backpack, running from room to room as if afraid the space might disappear if she didn't explore it fast enough. "Our castle," she declared, spinning in the middle of the living room. Daniel leaned against the doorframe, suddenly dizzy. He felt as though he had stepped into someone else's life. Charlotte watched Lily with a soft expression. "You don't have to stay if it feels wrong," she said quietly to Daniel. "I meant what I said. This is a partnership." "Not a prison?" he swallowed. "It doesn't feel wrong," he said. "It just doesn't feel real yet." "It will," she replied. They spent the afternoon settling in. Charlotte showed Lily which bedroom was hers, complete with a small desk by the window and shelves already stocked with books and stuffed animals. "You did this already?" Daniel asked, stunned. Charlotte shrugged lightly. "I had a feeling." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. That first night, they ate takeout on the living room floor. Lily chattered excitedly about how she wanted to decorate her room, how she wanted to invite her friend Emma over one day, how she wanted to bake cookies like in the movies. Daniel listened, heart full in a way he hadn't felt in months. After Lily went to bed, the apartment grew quiet. Daniel stood on the balcony staring out at the city lights. Charlotte joined him, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Chamomile," she said, handing him one. "Thank you." They stood side by side, the cold air brushing their faces. "You can still walk away," Charlotte said softly. "Even now?" He shook his head. "I won't." "Why?" He considered the question. "Because I meant what I said in that office," he replied. "When I said I do, I meant that I would show up, however this looks. However long it lasts." Charlotte studied him in silence. "Daniel," she said, "I don't want you to feel like you owe me." "I don't," he said. "I feel responsible," she exhaled slowly. "So do I." The next weeks passed in a blur. Charlotte's life moved at a pace Daniel had never experienced. There were meetings, phone calls, dinners with investors, strategy sessions that lasted late into the night. Her calendar was a maze of obligations. Daniel did his best not to get in the way. He learned quickly how to navigate her world, when to speak, when to listen, when to simply stand beside her and be present. He attended events as her husband, shaking hands with people who saw him as little more than a title at first. But Charlotte never treated him that way. She asked his opinion about things that mattered. She listened when he spoke, even when his perspective was simple, unpolished. "You see things differently," she told him once. "That's refreshing." He wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an observation, but it mattered to him that she said it at all. At home, life began to settle into something that felt almost normal. They cooked together when Charlotte was free. They helped Lily with homework. They argued gently over trivial things, what color to paint the hallway, whether the apartment needed more light in the living room, which cereal was best. One evening, Daniel found Lily sitting on her bed, staring at the paper star. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded. I like it here." His throat tightened. "So do I," he said. Daniel started searching for work again, this time with something he hadn't had in months: stability. Charlotte never offered him a job outright. He appreciated that more than she knew. When he finally landed a position with one of her company's subsidiary firms, after multiple interviews and a background check that had nothing to do with his marriage, he felt something shift inside him. He wasn't being kept. He was building something again. The first time he came home from work with a paycheck, he stood in the kitchen staring at it as if it might vanish. Charlotte watched him from the doorway. "You did that," she said simply. He looked up at her. "Yeah, I did." She smiled in a way that made his chest warm. Publicly, they were the picture of a composed, successful couple. Privately, they were 2 people learning how to exist in the strange space between pretense and reality. They didn't share a bedroom at first. Charlotte insisted Daniel take the guest room until they both felt comfortable. "I don't want you to feel forced into anything," she said. "I appreciate that," he replied. "But comfort has a way of growing quietly." They began staying up late, talking about Lily, about work, about Charlotte's father, and the company he had built. Daniel told her about his late wife, about the quiet grief that never truly left, but had softened into something he could carry. "I never thought I'd marry again," he admitted one night. "Neither did I," Charlotte said. "I never even wanted to." He looked at her, surprised. "I was married once," she continued, briefly. "More for convenience than love. It ended badly. I promised myself I'd never do something like that again." There was no accusation in her voice, only honesty. "And now?" he asked. "And now," she said softly, "I'm here." He didn't know what to say to that. The nights grew less awkward. Sometimes they watched movies together, Lily asleep between them on the couch. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, sharing the same space without the need for words. One evening, after a particularly long day, Charlotte collapsed onto the couch beside him. "I might lose them," she said suddenly. "Who?" "The board," she said. "They're already looking for ways around the rewritten clause. They don't like that I won this battle." Daniel felt something sharp spark inside him. "You won't?" he said. "You're too smart," she gave a tired smile. "Sometimes that's not enough." He reached for her hand without thinking. The contact was simple, steady. She didn't pull away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. 3 months into the marriage, Daniel realized something had changed. It wasn't one big moment, it was a series of small ones. The way Charlotte looked at Lily when she laughed. The way she remembered how Daniel took his coffee. The way she defended him when someone at a dinner party implied he was lucky. He's not lucky, Charlotte had said sharply. He's capable. Something in her tone had made Daniel's throat tighten. One night, standing on the balcony after Lily had gone to bed, Charlotte spoke the words that had been hovering between them for weeks. "You can still walk away," she said. "I know we said this would be temporary," he turned to her. "I don't want to," he said. She searched his face. "Even knowing how complicated this is? How public, how messy it could become." "Yes," she exhaled slowly, as if releasing something she had been holding inside. "I don't regret asking you," she said. He met her eyes. "Neither do I." They stood there together, the city stretching out below them, neither fully aware of when the line between necessity and choice had blurred. But both of them knew one thing for certain. What had begun as a marriage of need was becoming something far more dangerous. Something real. If you'd like, next I can extend part 4 into a full 2,200-word emotional conclusion, or increase conflict, board pressure, public exposure, emotional risk, or add a dramatic turning point before the final resolution. Just tell me how powerful you want the ending to be. Spring arrived quietly, the way it always did in the city, first with longer days, then with fragile hints of green in parks that had been gray for months. For Daniel, the changing season carried something deeper than warmth. It carried possibility. Life had settled into a rhythm he never would have imagined 6 months earlier. Mornings began with Lily rushing into the kitchen, already talking about school before anyone had fully woken up. Daniel packed lunches. Charlotte skimmed emails on her tablet while sipping coffee. Some days they laughed over spilled cereal and forgotten homework. Other days were quieter, weighed down by deadlines and responsibilities. But through it all there was something steady beneath the surface, a sense of us. Yet beneath that steadiness, something fragile pulsed. They had never named what was happening between them. Never crossed the line that would turn arrangement into something undeniably real. But the closeness had grown impossible to ignore, the way Charlotte's hand found Daniel's in public without thought. The way he reached for her instinctively when a room felt too crowded, the way Lily had begun calling them "my parents" without hesitation. And still, the original agreement hovered in the background like a shadow, temporary, necessary, unfinished. Daniel tried not to think about what would happen when Charlotte finally rewrote the clause, when the legal reason for their marriage no longer existed. But some nights, lying awake in the guest room that had long since stopped feeling like a guest room, the question pressed against his chest. What are we, really? The morning of Lily's school play arrived bright and warm. Daniel stood in the doorway of her room, watching as Charlotte carefully adjusted the ribbon in Lily's hair. "Too tight?" Charlotte asked. Lily shook her head. "It's perfect." Daniel smiled at the sight Charlotte kneeling on the floor, focused with a tenderness that made something twist in his chest. Once, long ago, he had watched his late wife prepare Lily for her first day of kindergarten with that same careful attention. For years after her passing, the memory had been too painful to revisit. Now, instead of guilt, Daniel felt something else: gratitude. The school auditorium buzzed with noise when they arrived. Parents filled the seats, cameras ready. Children peeked from behind the curtain, costumes half on, faces bright with excitement and nerves. They found their seats in the third row. "Daddy, do you see me?" Lily whispered from the aisle before being ushered backstage. "I see you," Daniel said. "Always." Charlotte squeezed his hand. The lights dimmed, music swelled. The curtain lifted. Lily stepped onto the stage with the rest of her class, a tiny sun in a sea of stars, her face glowing under the stage lights. She sang with earnest determination, every word carefully formed, every movement exaggerated with childlike sincerity. Daniel's throat tightened. He glanced at Charlotte. Her eyes were fixed on Lily, shimmering with something dangerously close to tears. "She's amazing," Charlotte whispered. "Yes," Daniel said. "She really is." The applause at the end was thunderous, but all Daniel could hear was the steady beat of his heart. After the performance, they found Lily near the stage door. She ran straight into Daniel's arms, breathless and beaming. "Did you see me?" she asked. "We saw everything," Charlotte said, kneeling to hug her. "You were perfect," Lily grinned and then looked between them. "Can we get ice cream?" she asked. Daniel laughed. "Of course we can." They walked out into the afternoon sunlight together, Lily skipping between them, swinging their joined hands. For a moment, it felt as if nothing in the world could touch them. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, the apartment was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. Daniel stood on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker on. He heard the soft sound of the door sliding open behind him. Charlotte stepped out, wrapping a light sweater around herself. "You're quiet," she said. He exhaled slowly. "I was just thinking." She leaned against the railing beside him. "About?" He didn't answer immediately. The city stretched out below them, millions of lives intersecting in ways no one could ever fully understand. Once, he had been just another man in that crowd, trying to hold his world together. Now somehow, his life had become something bigger, more complex, more meaningful. "I've been thinking about us," he said finally. Charlotte's posture stilled, just slightly. "And?" she asked carefully. He turned toward her. "I know how this started," he said. "I know what we agreed to, but this doesn't feel temporary to me anymore." She searched his face, something vulnerable flickering in her eyes. "It doesn't feel temporary to me either," she admitted. "But that doesn't mean it isn't complicated." He nodded. "I know." She hesitated, then spoke in a softer voice. "The clause is almost finished being rewritten," she said. "Legally. Once it's finalized, the board won't be able to touch me. The reason we got married. It will be gone." Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and fear. "And then what?" he asked. Charlotte looked away toward the skyline. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I told myself this was a contract, a solution. But somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing it that way." He studied her profile, the strength there, the quiet exhaustion, the vulnerability she rarely showed. "So did I," he said. Silence stretched between them. "What if this ends?" Charlotte asked suddenly. "What if we decide this was only ever practical?" Daniel felt something ache in his chest. "Then I'll still be grateful," he said. "For what you gave Lily, for what you gave me. But I don't want it to end." She closed her eyes briefly, as if bracing herself. "Neither do I," she said. The words hung between them, fragile and powerful. But neither of them moved closer, not yet. The board meeting was scheduled for the following week. Charlotte had been tense for days leading up to it, her calm exterior stretched thin by the constant pressure. Daniel tried not to interfere, but he could see the toll it was taking. The night before the meeting, he found her sitting at the dining table long after Lily had gone to bed, documents spread around her like pieces of a puzzle. "You should rest," he said gently. She rubbed her temples. "I will soon." He pulled out a chair beside her. "You've already won," he said. "You know that, right?" She looked up at him. "I've won on paper. But that doesn't mean they won't try to make this painful." Daniel hesitated, then said, "Whatever happens, you're not alone." Her gaze softened. "I know," she said. "And that's what scares me," he frowned. "Why would that scare you?" "Because I didn't expect this," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to care this much." The words landed heavily. Daniel felt something shift inside him, a quiet understanding that what they were building together was no longer fragile simply because it was new. It was fragile because it mattered. The day of the meeting arrived. Charlotte left early, dressed in a tailored navy suit, her hair pulled back in its usual elegant style. She kissed Lily on the forehead before she went. "Wish me luck," she said softly. "You don't need luck," Lily said seriously. "You're the boss." Charlotte laughed and then glanced at Daniel. "I'll call you when it's over," he nodded. "We'll be here." The hours that followed stretched endlessly. Daniel took Lily to the park, helped her with homework, tried to keep his mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. But every time his phone buzzed with a notification that wasn't Charlotte, his heart sank a little. Finally, just after sunset, his phone rang. "Daniel," Charlotte said, her voice tight but controlled. "It's done," he exhaled. "You won?" "Yes," she said. "The clause is gone, permanently. They can't use it against me ever again." A rush of relief flooded him. That's incredible," There was a pause on the line. But, Charlotte continued, something else happened. His chest tightened. What? They questioned the marriage, she said. Not legally, emotionally. They implied it was a strategic move, a performance. They asked whether I intended to maintain it. Daniel closed his eyes. And what did you say? He asked. I said I would make my own decisions, she replied. But they made it clear they'll be watching. Any sign that this was only convenience. And they'll use it against me in every way they can. Silence hung between them. I'm coming home, she said. When Charlotte walked through the door an hour later, she looked exhausted in a way Daniel had never seen before. Not physically, emotionally? Lily ran to her immediately. You won, right? She asked. Charlotte knelt and hugged her tightly. Yes, she said. I won. After Lily went to bed, Daniel poured 2 glasses of water and brought them into the living room. Charlotte sat on the couch, staring at nothing. He sat beside her. They think this was a lie, she said quietly. Daniel took her hand. Was it? He asked. She turned to him, eyes searching. At first? She said, yes, it was survival. But now, I don't know how to pretend it isn't more than that. He met her gaze. Then don't pretend, he said. She inhaled sharply as if bracing herself. What if I'm wrong? She asked. What if this is just comfort, familiarity? What if I lose you because I asked for something real? Daniel felt his own fear rise. I lost someone once, he said. I know what it's like to be afraid of loving again. But I also know what it's like to be afraid of not loving at all. She stared at him. Charlotte, he said softly, I didn't marry you because you offered us a home. I married you because you saw us when no one else did, because you trusted me when you didn't have to. And somewhere along the way, I fell in love with you. The words felt terrifying and inevitable all at once. For a moment, Charlotte didn't speak. Then her eyes filled with tears. I didn't plan this, she whispered. I didn't want this, and now, I can't imagine my life without you in it. He reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then don't imagine it without me, he said. She leaned into his touch. Daniel, she said, voice shaking, can you be my husband? Not in name, not in contract, in truth. He smiled through the tightness in his chest. I already am, he said. But this time, yes, for real. For as long as you'll have me. She let out a sob that was half laughter, half relief, and closed the distance between them. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, as if both of them were afraid of breaking something precious. It was not the rush of a beginning, but the quiet certainty of 2 lives finally choosing each other. Years later, Lily would tell the story as if it were magic. How a paper star led them to a woman who changed everything. How her father, once a man with nothing but love and determination, was chosen in the most unlikely way. How a marriage that began in desperation became the foundation of their family. But Daniel knew the truth was simpler and far more powerful. Sometimes life doesn't change because of grand plans or perfect timing. Sometimes it changes because one person dares to ask an impossible question, and another finds the courage to answer yes.